Hello, good people of YouTube. Mountbatten here, and today we have the new German Tier 9 cruiser, the Manteuffel, or Manteuffel, however you say it, import to review for you guys today. This is it, dear viewers, the German cruisers that we can manually control their secondary guns. And I gotta say, it is something alright. More on that, of course, when we get to the gameplay review section of the video. But before we go any further, I have to give a massive shout out to the channel's Patreon supporters. I am not a CC, so I do not get to these ships to review in early access like a CC. We have to pick them up when they come out. In this case, with quite a bit of Patreon support for sure, since this is a early access cruiser that you can only obtain in the random bundles. And I had to go pretty far into those random bundles to get this ship. I was pretty hesitant on trying to get it because, of course, the high, dollar amount tied to these early access ships. But thankfully, with the anniversary event, I had quite a few doubloons from that event that helped bring the cost of this down quite a bit. But, of course, the Patreon supporters got us there the rest of the way. So massive thank you to those guys. And if you wish to be oh so generous, the Patreon is linked down below. It's the best place to support the channel besides just watching the streams and videos. So if you haven't noticed, there's quite a few secondary guns on the Manteuffel. And yeah, it's something special, all right. But we're going to go ahead and go over the ship now, look at her armor, look at her stats, talk about how she, should perform in game for you and all that jazz, and discuss whether or not you want to pick these ships up. Of course, these are going to be tech-line ships, so there's no need to rush out and get them right now. They will be available for everyone to grind completely for free in 2 more updates. So hold off on rushing out and getting them. They're way too expensive to try and get right now in early access. But let's go ahead and take a closer look at the Manteuffel. But anyway, so economic, of course, it is a tech-line ship. I did get the bonus package in the sequential bundles, in the bundles as well. So I do have that on here, and I am running green economic bonuses on my Manteuffel. So if that's what you're looking at in the gameplay section, keep that in mind. For the camouflage too, this is the camo that you can get in the event as well. Where is it? Ah, yes, over here. It's not on the destruction effects, you doyo. This is the Arctic camo for the Manteuffel. So, looks pretty nice. You get the nice little badge on the front and such. And again, I'm glad that we have an actual camo here, and it's not just gray. So, kudos to you, art department. Alright. So, looking at the ship's armor, you have a 27mm bow. That's a nice middle finger to 15-inch and below caliber shells. You have a 90mm upper belt. That's pretty nice. You have a 190mm. I'm sorry, the upper armor is 90mm. Your upper belt's 190mm, and your main belt is 190mm as well, with a little slim 27mm slat of torpedo protection. Stern is 27 as well. Stern deck is 27. Mid deck is 30. So pretty well armored for a cruiser, of course. Take a look at that citadel. It is slightly above the waterline right there. And let's see, when you add the other armor on top of it, it's got this turtleback on it, so there you go. And yeah, so it's pretty well armored, really well armored for a cruiser, of course. You have a little bit of spaced armor going on back there, so that might help you out every now and then. But yeah, okay, so the turrets are 320. There's 320 all the way around. 320 all the way around except for the top plate and the side plate, and the top's 110, and then you have some 180mm slats there, but everything else is 200. Oh, sorry, 320 front, 200 side, 200 rear, 215 rear. I don't know what I saw on the side that made me think it was 300 all the way around. Alright, for survivability, the build that I am running on the Manteuffel, you have 62,300 HP points. Or hit points, not hit points. 22% torpedo damage reduction. For the guns, you do get 6 350mm guns, which are some absolutely massive guns to have on a cruiser. I mean, we're talking about the large cruisers that have 305mm guns and how those are pretty much battleship caliber guns. But I mean, 350mm guns, those are legitimately, battleship caliber guns. 13.7, 8, almost 14-inch guns there, with a 25-second reload time and 180 time of 25 seconds as well, maximum dispersion of 196 meters, and a maximum range of 17.6 kilometers. The HE shells do 4,000 maximum damage, with a 28% fire chance, 88 millimeters of pin. Okay, wargaming. Initial velocity of 815 meters a second as well. The AP shells do a maximum damage of 10,500, with initial velocity of 815 millimeters as well. Now, the secondary guns, what you really, of course, care about with the Manteuffel. So you have a 3.1 second reload time on the 150mm guns with the build that I have, which is a full secondary build. A maximum dispersion of 302 meters, maximum range in manual mode of 13 kilometers, but if you leave them in automatic mode, they do have a maximum range of 12 kilometers, which is very nice for a cruiser to have that level of secondary range. The HE shells on the 150s do 1,700 maximum damage. They have a 9% fire chance, and they pin 38 millimeters of armor, and they come out the tubes at 875 meters a second. You get 6 of these guns. You get 2 in the front, 1 on each side, and then you get 1 in the back on the superstructure. And the real stars of the shows, the 128mm guns. You get 18 of these bad boys, with a 2.8 second reload time, a maximum dispersion of 302 meters, a 13-kilometer range in manual mode, and a 12-kilometer range in automatic mode. They do a maximum damage. They have a maximum damage rating of 1,500, 6% fire chance, and of course the sweet 32 millimeters of penetrating capability. So that is very nice when you're dealing with tier 9 and tier 10 ships. So yeah, you get 18 of these plus the 6 150 millimeter guns for a grand total of 24 secondary guns, both with around a 3-second reload time, which is just utterly ridiculous. And we'll talk more about these in the gameplay section. All right. You also get torpedoes. You get 2 racks of torps per side. So yeah. 2 racks of torps, 1 per side. That's what I meant to say. My bad. They have a 180 time of 7.2 seconds, a reload time of 110 seconds, and a range of 9.5 kilometers, which is quite comfortable indeed. Maximum damage of 16,560, and they travel at 65 knots with a detection range of 1.3 kilometers. So much further out than you see on most of the higher tier German ships that do have torpedoes. They normally top out around 6 kilometers and such on most of the other German higher tier ships, with the exception being the battle cruiser line and now the Panzerschiff line. So that's really nice. Alright, you do get 2 charges of the airstrike. She has an A rating of 82. You get 14x4 of the 20mm guns, 6x2 of the 55mm guns, and then of course the 18 128mm guns are dual purpose, which oddly enough gives this thing actually kind of decent AA, which is wild. Maximum speed of 34.1 knots with a turning circle of 840 meters and a rudder shift time of 13.6 seconds. Concealment with the build with the commander skill and the module is down to 11.7 kilometers. So that's right, ladies and gentlemen, you are within your secondary range when whatever it is spots you, which is, again, pretty wild for a cruiser. Alright, for the consumables, you get your choice of Hydra or DFAA, so you want to take the correct option with Hydra Acoustic Search. 4 charges of Repair Party with Superintendent. This regenerates 373 HP per second, again with the build that I'm running on the Manteuffel, for 28 seconds. And you also get the quick damage con of the Battle Cruiser line, with a 10-second action time, but a 38-second cooldown time, but you're limited to 5 charges. So obviously for the modules, I went with a full secondary build. So Auxiliary Armaments Mod 1 to increase the secondary battery survivability by 100%. Same with the AA guns, and obviously if we're dumping all of our points into, well, the secondaries, we want the secondaries to still be around. The Damage Con Mod 1 because, well, burning sucks. We want to burn as little as possible, right? So this reduces our chance of catching on fire by 5% and reduces our chance of getting a flooding from a torpedo by 3% as well. Then naturally secondary battery mod 1 for a 20% buff to the range and the dispersion of the secondary battery shells. Again, this thing's about the secondaries, so we want to increase their performance as high as possible. Then damage con mod 2 for a 15% buff to the fire and flooding recovery times. Again, the shorter you're flooding, the shorter you're burning, the less damage that is being applied to your ship. So yeah, we want to get that down as fast as possible. Concealment System Mod 1 because, well, being able to pick and choose when you want to engage is a massive thing in World of Warships, and being able to go dark and run away is very nice. And like I mentioned, we can get the detectability range within the secondary battery gun range, so if you can do that, you want to do that. Naturally, of course, Auxiliary Armaments Mod 2 for another 20% buff to the reload time of the secondary battery guns. So again, we want to be able to pump the secondaries out as fast as possible. This helps us do that. No surprise, we are of course running Gunther Lucians on our Manteuffel because, well, he's the secondary man and this is the secondary ship. So we went with Last Stand, so that if our engine or steering gears get knocked out, we can keep in the fight, which with a ship like this, when you're going in and brawling, you want to have that happen. I did go ahead and pick up Grease the Gears because I had a point left over and I figured that probably the best option, so keep that in mind. And then Demolition Expert for an additional 1% chance of fire on our HE shells. And yeah, you want that on this ship, believe it or not. Then, of course, Pack-a-Punch to increase our torpedo damage by 15% and increase our secondary battery firing range by another 20%. And then Adrenaline Rush, of course, because if we take damage, well, we give it a boost to our reload time. We get a 0.2% buff for every 1% of HP that we lose, so this is literally increasing your DPM for just playing the game and getting damage. Naturally Superintendent for an additional charge of our heal, hydro, and damage con. And then Top Grade Gunner, as it's called here, for a 10% buff to the secondary battery reload time and an 8% buff for the main battery reload time once a ship is within our ship's standard detectability range. So that's more DPM for free with the secondary guns and more DPM for the main battery guns when we are within secondary range. And last, most certainly not least, Concealment Expert for a 10% buff to our detectability. Once again, we get to pick and choose when we engage the enemy team. That's a great skill to have. Now, of course, with Lucians, once you get 100 secondary hits, you get a 15% buff to the reload time of your secondary guns, which is, of course, wild. So, yeah, that's the build I'm running on my Manteuffel. I'm going to go ahead and let VoiceOver Mountbatten have the show from here, and we'll talk about how the Manteuffel plays and all of that jazz in our gameplay review section. Alright guys, VoiceOver Mountbatten here, and oh my god. The Manteuffel is, it's insane. I'm honestly surprised this isn't a cruiser slot with the guns that this thing has, the secondaries that this thing has, and the armor that this thing has. Oh my god, this could have been like a second battle cruiser line, really, and it would have been perfectly fine. But these things being in cruiser slots, good god. Yeah, so the secondaries are insane. The 12-kilometer range, the reload time with the secondary guns with the full build, it's absurd. And that's not even taking into account the fact that you can control these secondaries like yourself. That is the most, oh my god, it's beautiful. For all of you secondary brawlers out there, I don't even know why you're watching this. It's the ship that you want German ships to be, right? Like, that's what this ship is. And I'd imagine by extension, the Adalbert and such are probably not too far off from where the Manteufel's at. Because usually the Tier 9, it's usually not that fantastic, then the Tier 10 is insane. And I do know that I believe the Adalbert has like even more secondary guns than the Manteuffel, which, again, 24 of these secondary guns, which is bonkers. So, secondaries, that's probably what most of you guys want to know. Manually controlling them is awesome. The secondary guns are not as accurate as like the Graf Zeppelin secondary guns are. If you have controlled them, it still feels like you are just kind of suggesting an area in which they're going to shoot. But of course now you can select that area, so like if a destroyer is trying to do the little funny wiggle and trick the AI gunners, you can take over the secondary guns and just be like, nope, I know what you're doing, buddy, and get them to just drill into the destroyer. And by drill, I mean, like, you're going to get most of the shells to hit, but you're not going to be getting, every single shell hitting the destroyer. It's still fairly inaccurate. It's more accurate than just letting the bots control it, all the time, but, you can get more shells hitting them when you take over the secondary guns. And that's what I was doing with the secondary guns throughout the night. If a destroyer popped up and it was fairly close, I grabbed control of the secondaries and shoved the secondary shells into its sides, or if he was trying to do the little wiggle and run away thing, I took over the secondaries. And like you guys see with the Jaeger at the start of this video, it's pretty dang effective, because a fair amount of those shells are those 150mm guns hitting the destroyers, and those really freaking hurt. Now, outside of like a destroyer, I wouldn't take over the secondaries. Like if I was going up against another sizable cruiser or a battleship, I'll just let the secondaries do their thing, because when you take over the secondary guns, they do have a longer reload time. But if you just let them be, they have that 2.8 second reload time. Then you go ahead and drop Adrenaline Rush and all the other skills on top of it. So they're normally going pretty good by the late game, and in those cases, I just would let them do their thing. And letting the secondaries do their thing by themselves, wow, you're going to get a lot of secondary ribbons with this ship. If you ever need secondary ribbons for whatever combat mission or whatever, yeah, just take out the Manteuffel or one of these other Panzer ships, and yeah, it's not going to be a problem at all. Now, of course, they aren't accurate like the GK. They're Sleeving secondary guns. I mean, they're pretty accurate for cruiser secondaries, but you can't take the manual fire skill that gets them up to that 50% buff, but they are more than accurate enough to get the job done, so you ain't got to really worry about that. Again, I would definitely use the manual secondaries on like destroyers and such, but really with like the battleships and larger cruisers, you kind of want the shells landing all over the place so that they have the greatest chance of starting a fire. And all the shells pin 32mm of armor, so if you're hitting the enemy ship with these secondary guns, you're more than likely pinning them and setting fires. So yeah, secondary manual controlled secondaries are great for sure, but they aren't as accurate as you might have thought they were going to be, but they're still definitely very, very useful for dealing with destroyers. What I really like too is that with the manual secondaries, you can blind fire smoke a hell of a lot easier than you normally would, because you're throwing 24 shells at them right in a salvo, or really you're getting about half of that on target at any given time. So 12, 14, depending upon what that rear 150mm turret is doing. So you can kind of farm, just kind of search the smoke and eventually, get a shell or two hitting the destroyer in the smoke. Doesn't really do too much, but does definitely psych them out. I've gotten more than a few destroyers to leave their smoke. I guess they didn't know they could just, stop shooting, and I couldn't trace the shells back to their ships. But it's pretty good for stuff like that, so that's a pretty easy way to reset caps, if the destroyer's in smoke trying to cap. That's pretty nice. So, yeah, don't worry about building into the main battery guns. They're just kind of there. They have German AP, so every now and then they'll do something pretty funny to a broadside ship. But most of your damages are coming from these secondary guns, either through the AI controlling them or you controlling them and, drilling destroyers with them. So, yeah, this thing's kind of nuts. You can kind of just push W right now and then things will happen. I'm not advocating you, go and do that, but like you find a good flank, wait a second or two for things to spread out, you can kind of run down it and get things done pretty well. And that's just with the secondary battery guns. Again, the main battery guns, yeah, the rear turret 360s, but who cares? The secondary guns are definitely the star of the show here with the Manteuffel. Now, the 9.5 kilometer torps are also really good, because a lot of times, of course, secondary ships will be hiding, and the fact that you have these 9.5 kilometer torps that you can really effectively shoot, if someone's, chasing after you, trying to run you down, and you're kiting them, you can launch these from like 12, 13 kilometers away, and if they're running full tilt into you, they will most definitely cover the distance needed for the torpedo to arm, well, for the torpedo to not run out in that time. So they're great for things like that, and of course for drive-bys too. The torpedo angles are a little not great. You do have to show a lot of skin to get the torps off, so don't fall into the trap of trying to get the torps off and then suddenly you're eating, a full broadside worth of AP from some ship, right? So just be mindful about that. But I mean, if you're driving up to people, they're still perfectly fine for that, and they do very much work in those regards. And the armor is really good for a cruiser. 27mm balanced stern. That's a nice middle finger to 15-inch shells. If you're top tier, that's fantastic. But it's definitely one of the tankiest cruisers in game, and obviously it has to be to be able to walk up to enemy ships with the secondaries going and such. So it's definitely got good marks there. But just like all the other German ships, right? What's tanky at close range gets chunked at long range. So make sure you are staying on top of that and making sure you are not giving someone your broadside if possible, right? So really great ship all in all. Oh, and it has Hydro too. I almost forgot the Hydro as well. That's great for popping a Hydro, running into a destroyer in smoke, and then melting him down with your secondary guns, or of course just using it to avoid torpedoes, or potentially spot someone that's sitting on the other side of an island. The ship does definitely handle like a small battleship. Obviously, with being so well armored and the way it's designed, your rudder shift isn't overly fantastic, so you got to keep that in mind. While you might be in the cruiser slot, you really have the maneuverability of a small battleship, so do keep that in mind as well. As far as like the bad sides about this ship, you can't really snipe with it because the range is so low and the main battery guns are not really accurate at all. Granted, at close range, they definitely get the job done, but like, if you love brawlers, you love secondary brawlers, this is exactly the ship that you were wanting it to be, with maybe less accurate secondary guns when they're in manual fire mode. But like, it's still a fantastic ship. Absolutely, I don't want to say the B word, but it's definitely cracked. Don't be surprised if some changes are made to these things before they release or shortly after they get released, because they are really strong right now. Again, the fact that I can kind of just slap W, go for it, and probably for sure get like 110, 120 damage game just by walking at the enemy teams is pretty wild. So yeah, don't get me wrong, of course, she does definitely have her downsides. She only has 6 main battery guns, so when you do need to rely upon them, like if no one's getting your secondary range, you only have 6 guns. They are not accurate at all, especially if you build into the secondary guns, which you should, because that's the entire point of the class, right? But like, this thing's still fantastic in my mind. The flaws are well worth it. So overall, I would give the Manteuffel, I do give the Manteuffel a 9 out of 10. This is a fantastic ship. It's a ton of fun, and I can't wait to get my grubby little hands on the rest of the line once they come out of early access. By that, I mean, of course, the Ad Albert, right? Because this thing's already pretty cracked. The Ad Albert's got to be absolutely like psychotic, right? With how good it is compared to this. So maybe it's terrible. There are some cases where the tier 9 is considered to be better than the tier 10, but this ship is fantastic. If you love secondary ships, you're going to love the Manteuffel, however you say it. Again, I would not go throw money at the event. These ships will be free in 2 patches, so there's no need to go and throw your wallet at the screen, in my opinion. I mean, this could be up to like 47,000 balloons for you if you have to go to the very last bundle in the random bundles, so I would not recommend that. But yeah, when these guys come out for normal release, absolutely go for it, guys. Hope you guys enjoy. If you did, make sure to drop a like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, all of that jazz. Hope you guys have a wonderful Friday. I will be live streaming right here tonight on the channel, probably playing a lot of the Manteuffel, so make sure you guys come out for that. Hope you guys enjoy. Have a wonderful weekend, wonderful Friday, wonderful rest of your weekend. Hope to catch you guys in the next one.